Today, every business is a digital business. Most of us are migrating workloads to the cloud, adopting DevOps tools, rolling out RPA software, and supporting a remote workforce. While opportunity is great, so is the risk of advanced cyber attacks. Many high-profile breaches start with a compromise of privileged credentials. CyberArk is the #1 leader in privileged access management. Talk to CyberArk today to secure privileged access for humans and machines across hybrid and cloud environments and on endpoints. Learn more at securityweekly.com/CyberArk and stay one step ahead of the attackers. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Learn how hidden vulnerabilities lead to application compromise in our next webcast with Sneak. You can register for our upcoming webcast and virtual trainings at securityweekly.com/webcast or go to /on-demand for previously recorded webcasts. DJ Sampath is the co-founder and CEO at ArmorBlocks. Prior to that, he was VP of Engineering and a founding member of the team at StackRox. And welcome to the show today, DJ.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you on the show and talk about what we term as business email compromise and expanding that to other communications mechanisms. I can't tell you how excited I am to talk about this. It's something that I mention all the time, and I feel like attackers, defenders, solutions providers are all kind of like, yeah, maybe someday, right? But that day is very soon, at least for your company and technology, correct?
Absolutely, you're spot on. With the whole workforce moving to working from home, with the shelter in place and working remotely, this has become top of mind for a lot of these security teams. As they think about, hey, what does my attack surface look like as my workforce moves over and starts working from home? The very first thought was, okay, I need to get them laptops, work laptops, and get the VPN set up. But once they get past that, the next thing becomes, hey, how are they communicating back and forth, and what channels are they communicating on? How do I provide appropriate controls to make sure that the team members are sharing the right things when they're talking about, talking with outside contractors, or if they're engaging with, content that's coming from outside in, how are they engaging with that? And so classically, this has been, always thought about as an email problem, and it still is. Don't get me wrong. Email's not going anywhere. But we're starting to see that expansion happen, from beyond emails to other forms of communication. And to your earlier point, the time is now, because if you take a look at my Slack inside the company, we've got so many vendors and contractors and support personnel on Slack on shared channels, right? And so it's entirely possible, that sometimes when the link is being shared, not everybody is checking. Not every single vendor, if you're working with a PR firm, for instance, they're not aware if a link is in fact malicious or not. And then when they share that, it's actually a broadcast medium. Sometimes the impact of that is wider than that of email, because a lot of people are on that channel. And the rate at which they engage with the content is so dynamically different. They click on that link very quickly, right, and then bam, a lot more people are compromised. And so we're seeing this pattern happen rather with an alarming amount of cadence. And so we at ArmorBlocks, we've decided that, hey, let's understand, let's start opening up our aperture, because we built a platform that can understand this. And so we're opening up the aperture to other channels like Slack, Teams, Box, Dropbox, pretty much the whole gamut of messaging and document sharing platforms as well.
Yeah, it's interesting as we think about messaging and collaboration tools. I mean, Zoom bombing can almost be thought of as video spam at this point, right? Rather than invading your inbox, I'm going to invade wherever you're hanging out, whether that's Slack or Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and to think that there's an implicit assumption that when you are on a conference call, you have different sort of privacy things. It's like your privacy expectations are very different, and so it's really challenging when somebody pops in. It's the exact same thing as somebody. Sending you spam or somebody sending you a phishing link and interrupting your communication workflows, but it's more obvious when it's a Zoom bombing that happens, and with the DMs as well, right? When you chat on a Zoom chat, you're basically making an assumption that hey, I have an expectation of privacy to know that once the call's done, all of those DMs are available for download. Now
Right.
that's a problem. Right
Well,
there.
there's also an assumption that everyone in the communication mechanism, right, Slack or Zoom or whatever it is authorized to be there. And all of
Right.
these communication mechanisms have a chat interface. And like you pointed out, DJ, usually when you see something in a chat, I think we click on it more without reservation because we assume that, oh, well, they're in our chat system. It must be okay to click on that. We've trained our users in awareness and education to not trust everything coming from email. That same level of awareness has not transitioned, as it was clear with Zoom and all these other things going on. The level of education hasn't transcended down to these other communication mechanisms.
Absolutely. And I think there's been also a shift in how we work, right? Emails was more of an asynchronous medium, and as we evolve into more real time exchanges, that's really the underlying human pathos, if you will, like the behavioral change and the behavioral shift to sort of instantly engage with the content that becomes available. That's put in front of you. And so when things show up on messaging, when things show up in a collaborative document, there's that implicit assumption. And on top of that, there's the outside in problem where people engage with a malicious document that's being shared or a link that's being shared. There's also the inside out problem, and classically, organizations like to refer to this as DLP, but it's not your classic data loss, right? It's more of it's a slightly more nuanced situation when somebody requests you for a document on Slack, and they're a contractor that you've been working with, say for 4 months, 5 months. You've gotten used to sharing information because they're working with you. You don't think twice about taking a document that contains confidential data and putting it on that channel because it's so native to how you use that platform. And so there's the as much as outside in is a huge problem, the inside out becomes even more of a challenge. And so if you think about potentially an account takeover happening on Slack, which is a use case that we've seen repeatedly in our customers, where somebody just asks for things and people automatically assume that hey, you're on Slack, I'm going to
right.
copy paste this and send it over to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, and that's interesting because with email, there's also the kind of the external. I'm trying to forge an identity, which largely we've gotten, I think, better at identifying that, right? But then there's I've assumed someone else's identity because password spraying is usually how they get there, right? And now it's coming from someone internally, and we've tuned some of our tools and technology to be able to detect that as well. But now you transfer those same scenarios down, especially the insider, down into an internal communication mechanism that lives outside of email, and it could be a really bad day.
Well, and I think what's more interesting with Slack is think about all the potential integration points that you have with Slack, right? Our CRM is integrated with our Slack. Our Google Drive is integrated with our Slack. So Slack made it really, really easy to get access to some of this information. And to DJ's point, if it looks like you're an insider on my Slack channel and you ask for data and I've got the integration, it's really easy to share that information back out very quickly.
Absolutely, and that's it's sort of the classic debate between friction versus security. Right? I mean, you reduce friction, but is that coming at the cost of security? And it's always a difficult balance for a lot of the organizations as they think about, hey, I want to be able to move fast, I want to be able to move quickly, I want to share this piece of content. As I'm thinking about it, not even as I finished copy. Nobody's hitting saves anymore in documents, right? It's as I'm thinking about it, I'm going to hit a share button. Bam! It goes out to everybody on Slack. It goes out to everybody, on emails, and instantly people are now processing it differently. They jump on it. So there is that shift that to your point, Matt. I think it's fully hooked in. It's easy to use, and it's completely all pervasive inside of the enterprise, which is part of the reason why at Armorblocks we said, hey, listen, we have to have that same mindset when we approach security. Slack made it easy to integrate into all of these channels. And at Armorblocks, we have to come up with that approach in the way we integrate with all of these channels. We have to be just as easy. We've got to connect across all of these channels and give our security team a more holistic view of what is truly going on across all of those channels in a way that's easy to process and easy to enforce.
But there's some challenges with that if we compare it to looking at email, right? Because over the years, email's a very old technology, right? Much older than Slack, let's just say, and there's been many things built into the protocol. Built into our awareness and training that tries to validate an email message. You can look at the headers of an email message, for example. How does that transfer to Slack? Like, you lose a lot of those controls when you go to Slack, right?
That's right. You're spot on. You no longer have the the sender's email address. There's no IP addresses through which it's actually hopped through. You don't have SPF checks or DMARC checks. Mm-hmm. You don't have any of those mechanisms. But what you do have on these platforms is you have the ability to introspect the using APIs. If you are if you are an admin, you're able to see if it's a malicious user logging in. You do have the ability to introspect using APIs to say, where did they log in from?
Yep.
Which client did they use to log in from? And what time of day are they logging in? And you're able to get that amount of telemetry if there's an account takeover in progress. If it is an external user, you do have the ability to sort of recognize that and say that, hey, this message came in from the external user. In the case of Slack, they do have API headers that provide you with that level of detail, but it's not quite the same. It's not something that a security team is used to. Right? It's new sets of APIs. And those APIs are not easy to access unless you have the appropriate editions, the right versions. And so we make it easier for them to see that. And on top of it, we don't want to do the same, we don't want to make the same mistakes in some sense that happened with emails, right? Yeah, emails has evolved in over a long period of time, and we've learned a lot in terms of how we need to provide appropriate types of controls for emails. We can take those learnings and move much faster when it comes to something like Slack, where we can use technologies like natural language understanding that says, hey, this is the context of communication that they're talking about, and this is okay and this is not okay. Let's go ahead and flag that and let the user know. And it's easier to inform a user individually, saying, hey, you might be clicking on a link that's suspicious, or you might be sharing a file that's that contains a payload that looks that's still active. You're able to now say that quickly to that user. So from an education perspective, you're educating them while you're preventing stuff from happening as well.
Yeah, making them basically aware, right? The point of awareness training, make them aware that there could be malicious threats coming in through these other mechanisms, right? And I think this problem is going to continue because, as we get so much email, right? And our email gets flooded, and have tried for a long time to use it for all kinds of notifications. I think Slack and these other mechanisms took off because I can take some of these things out of email now, right? When I get a ticket, I don't need an email, right? A lot of people even here have said, I just want to be notified via Slack. I'm like, that's great. That's great. Let's try and get stuff out of email, right? Because I think there's a better place for these communications. But what we can lose sight of very quickly is some of the protections and training that we do have inherently in email. And I love that you're interfacing with Slack via the API. Better you than me, by the way. I'm sure understanding Slack's API at that level is very challenging, but important for a lot of these, not just Slack, but other technologies, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and you're spot on. And one of the ways we're seeing this morph, from Slack to the reason why we're also starting to support like OneDrive and Box is people assume that when you send a share, when you click on the share button inside of one of these SaaS platforms and you say, you title a document as payroll, list of payroll information or something about, a bank account information for the organization, it's incredibly likely that when, if they receive that notification, either, in a Slack notification or in an email, they look at that and they go, hey, this is directly being shared by Box. That email is going to get delivered notifications for the show because it's coming from the right domain. and then they open it up, it's got a link to like another doc inside. It looks like a legit document, and it says read more over here. And people, think even less, than they would, if they're looking at that email coming from an external source, because hey, it's coming from OneDrive, it's coming from Box, it's coming from Google Drive. It should be legit. And so it becomes important to sort of scan those pieces as well. Like, it's like, hey, somebody's sharing some document. Is there something malicious inside of that doc share? Is this person supposed to even be sending that information, both into the organization and outside? And having that 360-degree view can really make a difference for a security team.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, the other attack surface I've seen really pick up over this period as well, DJ, probably a little harder to get your arms around, LinkedIn and Twitter. The number of LinkedIn requests that I get has gone up, but I'm also seeing a lot more attachments and links embedded from people I don't know. And in probably a harder environment to control than maybe Slack or OneDrive or Google Drive or some of those other things. But I'm seeing that there. And I'm also, Twitter has been notorious for this for a while. But man, the LinkedIn stuff lately has been going crazy.
You're right on. I think the challenge, the way we sort of have been looking at it, and we've gotten a number of our customers come to us and say, you guys are doing this really cool job of being able to centralize a lot of these things for us. Can you add a few of these other feeds? A lot of people even come to us from a brand impersonation perspective. Like, hey, somebody's tweeting poor things about a brand, and can you also help us out with this? But from the reason, we've sort of separated what is inside of the enterprises as what's outside. And classically, it's been difficult to sort of like think about LinkedIn, even though LinkedIn is mostly used for a professional network. It's not something you can ask an enterprise security admin to say, hey, I want all of your LinkedIns to now have this sort of Armor blocks plugged into your LinkedIn feeds. Maybe I'm looking for a job outside and I'm not comfortable plugging this into my enterprise's offering. And so we've been thinking about, how do we go beyond the enterprise offerings? And we've got some ideas that we're working on internally to be able to, to help, individual users, so that it's not necessarily just in an enterprise offering. But if I'm a LinkedIn user and my company already has Armor blocks, I now have additional capabilities to protect my own private, channels of communication. It's sort of how 1Password did a really good job of being able to offer personal accounts to protect your be your password manager if you're inside of the enterprise. So you now have multiple vaults, your personal vault, and you have the enterprise vault, and you can store your credentials, in a safe way across the board.
Yeah, and it's interesting, in both LinkedIn and Twitter, you have this aspect of there are corporate owned accounts, right? You've got the corporate page in LinkedIn, you've got your corporate Twitter account, and then as an individual, we don't require it, but we recommend it. Like, if you're going to work here, and a lot of places do, like that you participate in these various social media networks. Now, LinkedIn, I think, does a much better job of securing and controlling its environment than Twitter, let's just say, right? But that's really hard. Like, we talked about some of the fundamental things we have in email to validate messages, even at the protocol layer. Twitter is very, very open environment. The API is very, very open. The ability to direct message people is very open. Basically, it's easier to commit fraud on Twitter than most other platforms, right? And I'm actually surprised we haven't seen, at least I haven't seen, like, more well-crafted business targeted attacks on Twitter via DMs and things like that. Most of the stuff I see, at least on Twitter DMs, it's obvious, even though I may have a higher alert on email, when even the marketing team's looking at these DMs, they're like, it's clearly spam, right? It's clearly fraud, right? Mm-hmm. But that could get better, and that's kind of dangerous.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. I think that's been one of our top asks across the board. But we definitely see that evolution happen, and I think you're right about the fact that it's going to show up on Twitter first. Yep. It's the least well protected organization when it comes to, from an offering perspective, and I think LinkedIn does a better job. To your point, but I think to Matt's point, I think the LinkedIn one is more targeted. Mm-hmm. When you see somebody, there's some amount of social proof that happens when you see a message that comes from a person that has 30 other shared connections with you. And then when you look at those shared connections, you automatically assume that, hey, if those people know this person, then this person must be legit, right? And I think that social proof part of it is really what gets to you from a networking perspective. And so I've seen now lots of these bots emerge even on the LinkedIn platform that we personally reported, that said, hey, this person is a bot. I know this person, and this person is not this person. There's another LinkedIn profile of this person floating around. So we're seeing that increase in on the LinkedIn platform as well. But being able to tell the difference, from an executive impersonation, from a colleague, employee impersonation, we do that really well on emails today. We're starting to do that on other platforms like Slack, and it's only a matter of time before we start, offering that beyond these platforms, beyond these walls to LinkedIn and Twitter, and pretty much every platform that people use to communicate one way or the other.
Yeah, it's interesting. We still see fraud on LinkedIn, even though the bar is much higher from the API standpoint. And from the bot standpoint, LinkedIn has done a fantastic job of controlling their API and looking at bots, right? Not so much with Twitter, definitely less. But we see a lot of effort going into getting around those controls on LinkedIn, because I think the payoff is higher. Like you said, it's a more intimate, personal environment. Executives are likely to have a LinkedIn account where they may not have a Twitter account, or they may have a Twitter account, but it's it's just for posting, right? It's just for outbound communications.
Right, exactly. And so every single data point sort of matters, in terms of how people engage with those communication channels, right? To your point about, we see that, a lot of email. Just going back on one of the earlier points, as you were saying that, we mostly have emails under control. I was just shaking my head a little bit over here because, I was reflecting on something that just happened last week, at a customer. And it's really hard, to sort of, while there are education and awareness efforts that constantly happen, mistakes at this point in time are happening. So, the targeted attacks are so insidious. They're very well crafted. They just show up where that people just miss the smallest of details because they no longer have the ability to look over the shoulders and, say, hey, does this look legit to you? Mm-hmm. We saw, hundreds of thousands of dollars, going away like that. And the hardest part is really convincing the executive team to recognize that, hey, listen, you did lose some money. Yes, insurance is going to pay you that money back. And I think that's a good thing. Yes, so that you're, from a liability perspective, you managed to address that part of it, but your premiums did now shoot up through the roof. And so, it's a little bit of a hard sell because most of the teams don't want to publicly acknowledge that, yes, this compromise sort of happened. And that's true for across the channels, when I want to share just briefly how an attacker on Slack managed to do this. And you'll find this fascinating. What they did was basically, there's a gentleman who works remotely, and this was, pre-COVID, and this person always worked out of a Starbucks. And so, which meant that, this person was in a publicly, open network. And while we are not entirely sure if they used the appropriate, mechanisms to protect themselves, they would use Slack on a regular basis and communicate with the organization. And this person went on a vacation for 2 weeks. And during the 2-week time period, somebody else had taken control of that Slack account and was in the Slack with about 1,500 people in the company, and then asking all sorts of questions on all of the channels, and basically got responses from most people, but eventually one of the colleagues who works closely flagged it to the HR team and to the security team, saying, this seems odd. This person's asking the same sets of questions again and again. Something doesn't seem right. And then they dug in deeper to discover that, hey, this person's actually on a vacation. And then they shut down the accounts and then forced to pay upon it, and the basic hygiene mechanisms kicked in. But it took them roughly about 5 to 6 days to figure out that something was odd about this person. And so it just goes to show that on a platform which is more of an instant messaging communication style, it's a lot harder to sort of understand what might be going on should an account get compromised from an impersonation perspective. And I would like to say emails are solved, but unfortunately, it is better than Slack in terms of where the protection mechanisms are, but there's still a lot of
I agree. I don't think it's solved. I think it's better, and I think that I think of organizations having process to to stop the effectiveness of those business email compromises. But not every organization, has those processes, or now with everyone working from home, like you said, they can't easily validate and follow that process of, if I get something that's a little questionable, I go over to the finance team and I ask them, right? Well, now everyone's working from home, so am I shortcutting my process and going, oh yeah, I'm just going to process that because that person's not getting back to me when I sent them an email or whatever, right? So I think we're in a worse state now, all working from home, in that if you haven't kind of reinforced and re-implemented your processes, you could be subject to even greater risk.
Right, exactly. That's precisely what it's been on top of mind of all of the security practitioners that we're talking to, and to that end, we said, hey, listen, you want to try our product out for free if you are in that situation where you're overwhelmed and you want to just be able to plug in something within a few minutes and start getting some more additional telemetry that helps you. More power to you. Let's figure out a way to do our part in being able to help our colleagues out.
Fantastic. Matt, any closing thoughts, questions?
No, great. Thanks, DJ, for all the insight.
Yeah, fantastic. And your product announcement, people should check back on your website. Obviously, they want a demo and or obtain the product. But in a couple of weeks, you're going to be supporting Slack in terms of this, right?
That is correct. That's correct. And we will, our website's www.armablocks.com. And we'll start adding / product name specific products. So if you search for /Slack /email /box, you'll find the appropriate landing pages for all of those.
Fantastic. DJ, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. That will conclude the show for today. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.